welcome. And today I have Michiel Vos from CocoPallet.
Yes, great to be here. Listened to most of your podcasts in the car last week, and happy to be here.
Thank you, Michiel. I'm glad you enjoyed them, and we're really glad to have you here because I think you've come up with one of the most elegant kind of circular solutions that I've ever seen, and I think CocoPallet has got a very promising future.
Yeah, definitely. We developed it by interviewing hundreds and hundreds of customers in Asia. And so we came up with this product because it just makes sense.
So clues in the name, I guess, but what is CocoPallet?
Oh, it's very simple. To transport things like in boxes, you need pallets to put them in a container. So it's just a helping hand for like transportation. Mostly they're made from wood. And wood is very scarce, very expensive, almost doubled in price some places. So we have an alternative for wooden pallets for the Asian market, for the exporters. And we make it from the waste from coconuts, like the hairy part around the coconut. That's usually just being thrown away, being burned. And so we buy it from the farmer cooperatives, we process it, and we press it into big, heavy molds into very sustainable, 100% bio-based pallets that can be reused as soil improver after they arrive in America or Europe. So we focus on Asian market because they need the most export pallets, one-way pallets. And so it's a solution to where wood is expensive, scarce, and needed in high quantities. So it's a totally circular project. And what's the interesting thing about the coconut? It has the fiber, but also the glue inside. So you make a kind of NDF without any additives. No chemicals, no nothing.
I think that's the super, innovative part that you guys have done, because I've seen a lot of things using fibers, molds, and other things where we can use natural fibers. But you seem to have taken it one step further, or maybe it's just the fact that the coconut is kind of the Swiss Army knife of the plant kingdom. It's just an unbelievable resource. I think you can kind of map, and I've actually seen in the past that scientists have looked into the different DNA sequencing of coconuts, and you can kind of see how our economics and societal colonization, etc., sort of took the coconut everywhere rather than just the tides, because it obviously float. But you guys have really managed to do something special, I think, which is you're not using any resin, you're not using anything to kind of that's not non-natural, I should say, to make your pallets. That must have been technically quite challenging.
Well, it's easy to make panel board, like flat things, but we make like 3D shaped things. That's the hard part. And basically any woody material has like lignin, cellulose, and hemicellulose, like three main components. Mm-hmm. Coconut has the same, the husk. And if you just put a lot of pressure and heat, it just melts together. Mm-hmm. But how to do this in a 3D shape, that's the challenging part, because you have no flow.
Yeah.
But yeah, the coconut, it's the tree of, they call it the tree of life, the coconut palm. And because you have food, drinks, fuel, building materials, it's just amazing. We love the coconut tree.
Yeah, we've seen a few. Well, we've actually interviewed a couple of founders doing cool stuff with coconuts on Disruptors for Good, because, as you say, they're just, I think, because they're fibrous as well, and the husk is a problem if it's not disposed of correctly, and we eat millions, in fact billions probably, of coconuts globally. So there's a lot of coconut farming, right? And that produces all the waste, and the waste, I think, is just typically burnt or stacked, and then you get rats and infestations and all this other kind of stuff around it. So it's not really something that's seen to have a value. But I mean, you're making a product that will have definitely a value for it. And you mentioned that you're already experiencing kind of crazy demand for your product. Why do you think that is?
It's very simple, because what we did is develop something that is sustainable and affordable. Mostly sustainable things are way more expensive. Like organic tomatoes are like 2-3 times the price of an average tomato. Mm-hmm. And we learned from our hardwood bamboo project that we did years ago. We made a brilliant product with like a good alternative for hardwood, but our price was higher than the cubic meter price of hardwood that could be illegally taken from the forest.
Right.
So you could not scale it. You have to scale it. So you have to find the biggest problem you can find. So you have to start loving problems and looking at problems and looking the opportunity in the problems. And that's what we did. We said, like, we made something that is does the same trick and is sustainable and the same price or cheaper than the existing solution. And especially when prices go up, people just run to you. And that's what's happening right now.
Right.
It's, basically like big corporations, like plus also the multinationals, they have this sustainability paragraph in their goals and things, and so they have to, but they have no idea how to do it. This is like very easy. You make it easy for people to like, hey, you got something better, and the price is right. So we can calculate that you have. Like, let's say you use 1 million pallets and they're like $2 cheaper. So like, hey, that saves you $2 million. Well, that's something you want to tell your manager. Hey, I just saved you like $2 million. And our carbon footprint goes down, and then we can calculate what is the CO2 reduction. So it's a numbers game. It's you have to quantify what you're doing, so you also can steer, you can learn from that. But we quantify everything. We are we're like data mining all the time about the sourcing, about the production, about the energy, about what we're replacing, and that's interesting. Way more important than we thought.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit, and I also want to know why pallets. How you first cottoned on to this opportunity around pallets, because they're kind of, we all see them in hardware stores, but like it's not something I've ever thought about as a market opportunity. If I'm brutally honest,
nobody thinks about pallets.
But before we answer that, I had a look at your background, your bio, and I like to try and understand from our guests how they got into the game they got into, and what led them there. And I've never spoken to someone before who was like one of their early life experiences being a military police officer. So I was kind of shocked to see that on your LinkedIn. So tell me how your early career formed, and you must be used to tense situations, so business shouldn't be a problem.
Well, indeed, that's quite shocking, my military background. But one thing you learn in the military is just don't panic. Just what's happening and just take action and take decisions. Keep taking decisions. And you can never take only the right decision, so you have to move on. But no, it was mandatory service. We had to in those times, you know. I just got a letter from the Minister DOD, like, okay, you're expected at that military base then and then. I was like, oh, cool. Because I didn't know what study to do. And this is different times, you know. It was like 89 when I joined the army, and I had the best tests on everything, so I could basically choose what unit. So then, of course, you go for like the special forces, like the elite units. And I thought school was boring. The teachers were stupid. I was like a terrible kid. And then I just showed up at the army base, and I thought like, oh my God, this is even worse. People are screaming at me.
Yeah.
But actually, I just flourished in that environment after a few months because I liked it. I always had this warrior gene. But it took much longer than expected. It was supposed to take 12, 14 months. And I came out of the army after 2.5 years. During that time, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. We all decided to kick him out. And so our team was sent in, and we were living in the desert for half a year. And that was an amazing educational time with like all these people from different kinds of parts of the world. And it was, if I compare it with all the people I know that have been to Afghanistan and Iraq, I think like, oh, what we did was like a walk in the park, like a Club Med. But other people will not disagree with that. But it was so educational. It was like pressure cooker. It was fast learning. I'm very grateful for that crazy period in my life.
It's something to draw from. And when you got back, like what was life like, and what was your journey to next sea?
Well, I think you hear this more often from people who've been to war. They think like everything is boring after you come back from such a thing. And so I came back here for 2 weeks, and then I thought like, nah. So I lived in the States for like 6 to 9 months and traveled around, got approached by the US Marines if I wanted to be an officer there. And then I said, hey, I'm not even American. He said, oh, we can fix that. As it was like a disease, not being American. It was quite funny. And then I just started like businesses, worked here and there, and just finding my way because, you know, this few years in the military uprooted my whole academic career, basically.
Right.
You know, you don't want to go back when you're like 22, 23, sitting between kids from 18, 19. And that was a big change that like changes the course of your life. And then you have to decide, okay, if this is not the thing, what is it going to be? And then, you know, and I've always been a very avid reader. So I read every day still, buy books every week. And you just start educating yourself and doing different things.
And what was the steps after that? Like, is the next nearest thing to the excitement of warfare being an entrepreneur, or was there some steps in between?
Nah, not really. Like I was a bit lost and didn't really know what was my purpose. And you know, and my parents were like always telling us like, you know, the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And we were like, yeah. You know, all of us doing something meaningful. Because it's not about just consuming and just having a job to go on holidays. No, you have to add value. And adding value is, I think, something very important in our family. And I'm very grateful for that. Because living without a purpose, I think that would sound so empty to me, to us. So I also like, what is the thing I'm here for? And slowly, and of course it took way too much time to get there, but and then the path unfolds when you start walking. So it was the bamboo project, some water cleaning project before, now the CocoPallet project. But everything you do helps you in the next steps. And one time, when everything comes together, you think like, oh, this is why I had this experience and then doing that. Everything you did in the past, even if you thought they were massive failures, help you. And I think that's such a relief that you think, oh God, so I didn't waste those 20 years. It was just training.
Yeah. So how did you come to this idea around pallets?
It's simple because I was importing a lot of stuff from China, mostly natural stone. I still have a natural stone company on the side.
Okay.
Pallets were always of very poor quality. And then I was always pissed off because like, why? No. And I've been to China like 20 times. And I thought like, oh shit, I never seen trees there, no forest. They have hardly any wood. That's why they take anything they can get their hands on. It should cost as little as possible because everything you spend on packaging goes up from your net profit.
Yeah.
And then I read this report from the university, the agricultural university in the Netherlands, that the professor gave it to me personally, Professor Van Dam. He said, like, read this because this is massively available. There are like 72, like 80 or 80 billion coconuts worldwide, and the husk has fiber and glue, and nobody's using it really. And I thought, like, wow, that's interesting. And so I read the report. I called him the next day and said, like, hey, why is nobody doing this? Because this looks brilliant. He said, like, oh, everybody fails because of this and this and this, all stupid things. And I thought, like, they just developed the wrong product. And after 2 months or something, I thought, like, oh, when I received a container of stuff with bad pallets, like, you're going to make pallets. And then I went back to the university. He said, like, yeah, but that's not possible. And then everybody said, like, it's not possible because you can only do flat things. And I thought, like, nah, it must be possible. And as nobody believed it, I thought, like, well, I just took my savings and I went to China, bought a machine and stuff, and we just started making things. So it was like 2 years of disaster. And then finally, when I took my youngest brother Daniel with me one day to the north of China, I was in the middle of winter, we made pallets that were not good enough, but reasonably enough, saying like, okay, we're in the right direction. And so it was, the most important thing is just do not give up, show grit, and just continue. I've been advised at least 200, maybe 300 times to stop it, to do something. And you just have to not, like, people think you're listening, and then just do what you think is the right thing to do.
You have to stay the course, right? So this is your military experience coming in, which is like you have no choice.
Yeah,
in a way.
That's helpful. Yeah, you know, like, this got my name on it. I have to do this. This is my calling, and then you're being tested and tested and tested, and still we're not there yet. We're opening the big first factory of many next year in the Philippines. We're really looking forward and working towards that. But if the first factory is operational and we're making products that customers like and we're making a decent profit, which looks like it, then it's so scalable. We can build like 3-4 factories in the Philippines. We have invitations from Indonesia, India, also 2 countries with lots of coconuts.
Yeah.
Thailand, Mexico, Brazil, of course. And but also, if you can make pellets, you could make a lot of other things too. You know? So that's something for later. First, laser focus is pellets, and that's it.
And why China? Because that seems I don't think of China as a place with many coconuts.
They have some coconuts in the south and Hainan Island. It's like the Hawaii, China.
Yeah.
But but they make, there's a lot of machine building in the north, China.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I went there. Because they were making machines, and like a press there will cost you like 100K, and the same press will cost you like 2 million in Germany, for example. So
this is the press that actually molds the fibers and
of course it's utterly useless.
Yeah.
To use a press of 100K.
Yeah.
We found out.
Right.
But it's a very delicate process. You need uptime, and so we decided to go the way which is like uptime. And so then you work with machine builders that are just excel in what they do, and that's why we came back to Europe. Yeah.
And now you've cracked it. How are these things strong enough to take the stone that you originally used to get on a pallet? Because obviously coconut husk doesn't seem like something that would be particularly strong with heavy loads.
Our focus is on fast-moving consumer goods, like things in boxes, not too heavy, not exceeding like 1,000, 1,200 kilos a pallet. Mm-hmm. And that's a massive market already. So if somebody says like, oh, I want to put concrete on it or natural stone, which has like a density of like 3,000 kilos a cubic meter, we say, no, don't do it.
Yeah, okay.
And also because stone and concrete things you put outside in the rain. And the whole idea is that our pellets are used in a dry environment.
Okay.
And at the end of the line, they're being shredded and used as biomass.
Yeah, so this is, I think, is one of the most amazing things. So, because you basically are taking something that is biomass, that is a waste product, that you then turn into something of value for a coconut farmer potentially. And then you obviously do your clever stuff to turn it into something of value. And I think one of the key things here is this. I've had a look at them, right? They, unlike normal pallets, they kind of nest into each other a bit like if you had some paper cups or something where you...
right.
So they don't take up like a ton of space when they're not being used. So that's...
So when we ship them... Yeah. True. When we ship them to our customers, we can put like 3 times more in a container than the normal pellet because they nest them. Also, it implements that if you put them in the racking, it's different than other pellets because you need like a closed floor of the racks. And so we just have to explain like, is this going to work? So that's why we have to study like the supply chain, not only like one place, but the whole supply chain of customers.
Yeah,
this is going to work for you. And so sometimes, or very regularly, we say like, we don't think this is a solution for you. You better use this solution or that solution. Like, and if people can use reusable pellets, that's always the best thing to do. So if people can do that, if they only use pellets in America or Europe, you say like, hey, just use a very strong plastic or wooden pellet that can reuse hundreds of times. It's better for you. Yeah. And so it's like understanding the needs of the customer and their customers, because it's the supply chain. It's the most important thing for us. And my colleague, our colleague in the Philippines, Michiel, he is like a master in that. He's just interviewing them, having like questionnaires, and just trying to deeply understand what is it what you do. Is this going to work for you? And if so, how are we going to make it work? Which is also a fun process, you know. Sales by just pushing boxes, that's boring. By listening, more consulting way of sales, that is so much better.
So the initial customers for you guys are selling, I don't know, phones and laptops and electronics and those kinds of things because it's a natural fit.
Toys, food, and also like that's where we start with. Also, can you imagine the amount of pellets needed for fruits and vegetables and bananas? Like that's insane.
So these pallets typically would be be shipped long distances with the produce on, right? And then there's no, I don't know, I kind of assumed in my mind that pallets just got kind of used for the next thing, a bit like a shipping container. But that's not the case, is it?
No, see, the pallets that we're used to, see, a container is typically something that is meant to be used hundreds and thousands of times. And a pallet that is in a local circulation, like in Europe, America, like in Australia, same thing. But for export, when it goes over the seas, over a thing to another continent, that never comes back.
Yeah.
So every cent you spend on that thing, it's like a cardboard box, just bare minimum. That's it. Because otherwise, it doesn't make sense financially. And we could make a pallet that's extremely strong and can be used 100 times, but we refuse, because then we have to add chemicals and synthetic stuff to it, and we don't think it's needed. Because if you just receive the pellets at the end, shred them and sell them as biomass, all the companies that make pot soil and import coconut material, they were faced with massive price hikes in the containers. The container that used to cost $1,000 costs now $15,000. Wow. So the shipping is more expensive than the what's in the container. So they've seen the tests, what the university did about the reuse of the CocoPallet after use, and they're like, oh, bring it here, love it, because it does the same thing, but the shipping costs are already paid for international shipping.
So essentially, when it's, I mean, the point around shipping, I mean, I think everyone's feeling that if they ever have to get something imported or move or whatever, the cost of shipping containers, I know from friends here, obviously in Singapore, it's just got crazy simply because of the fuel price hike. So that's going to be adding some demand, I'm sure, because your product is even more attractive then if you can import more pallets for in one container than you would in a typical one.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. Also, it will reduce the carbon footprint per pallet big time, and that has to do with fuel, basically. But you see that it goes up and down. You see the container costs are going down now, but they will never go back to the level, I think, that we had the last 10 years. They're building more vessels, so the more containers are being made, so the cost will go down. And but the world is changing, and from offshoring we're going to like onshoring, so people will start producing more things in Europe and in the States, which I think is a very good thing. But we're looking at a different world in 10 years to see what's happening, and the fuel costs. It's very exciting to see what's happening, and people can make their choices like, oh, I'd rather buy something which is locally grown and sourced and made from far away. So, but then still, if the market from 1.7 billion pellets goes to 1 billion pellets a year, that's still a lot of pellets and a lot of wood, and we don't have that.
So how much is a pallet to just so, because I don't know about this kind of stuff, how much does a pallet set you back?
It depends a bit what kind of pellet we make, but we want to sell there where we're competitive. So it will be between 10 and 12 US dollars ex factory. Depends a bit on the size. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, if the alternative made from wood is like $24, that's the case, we can go up in price.
Definitely. And you want to be doing that as a startup, of course.
Yeah, you can bankroll your own growth in a way.
Yeah, you could keep away from these dodgy VC guys, right? So.
Yeah, see, you have to be very picky for investors. You need some alignment in that, because if it's only money driven, then there's no match. It's gonna work against you. You're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. That's why we're very picky with who we work with. We learned that, and we have shown that we can make something which is extremely strong, and that answers the demand from the market, and then we can scale it, and we have a very strong team. So I think we're extremely interesting for an impact investor, but somebody like a group that really wants to scale, because we can build 10 factories, and so that's massive. So we are quite confident that is not the biggest problem. Also, the sales not, because we create a pull from the markets. And even a company like would say we don't buy pallets directly because our suppliers do. We tell them to use a CocoPallet instead of a wooden pallet because it's better for us.
Yeah, well, it seems to make sense that you can scale up based on where there's a rich supply of coconuts as your raw ingredient.
Yeah, and those are the most beautiful places on earth.
Yeah, not too bad for office offsites, is it? I guess if you're in places like Brazil and
Yeah.
Philippines and Indonesia, etc. Have you already got ideas of where this can go? Because the mold, I guess I should describe, it's kind of like a 3D mold that you've made with the fibers, so that a forklift can get underneath and pick it up, and it will support all the produce and things that you were describing. But it's not kind of dissimilar in a way to what you might find in a modern, I don't know, like a laptop or something like that, or a phone box or something. They're trying, obviously, all the consumer electronics companies are trying to do the right thing and not use plastic molded stuff anymore, and they're kind of using cardboards, I've seen, and other things. So it's not hugely dissimilar to that. So have you already got ideas of what next applications you can do with something that is sort of three-dimensional and structural, or would you rather not say?
We have a lot of ideas about that, but the main question is like, what problem you want to solve first? And I think that the availability of sustainable building materials, affordable sustainable building materials in like remote areas, I think that's very interesting. Like making building products on islands in Polynesia, the Caribbean, whatever. They have a lot of coconut waste, but they have to import plywood and they have particle board, which is very expensive because containers to these small places are very costly. It would be more in that direction, like smart building products, because that solves a problem. But that only when we have built several factories of CocoPallet that run well, that you would do something like that. And that could be together with local governments, local entrepreneurs, because, I think that entrepreneurs really it's such a more efficient model to bring change. Like for profit, you can solve any problem. And especially if you have this more holistic view that you think like, okay, it's about who are the stakeholders and how can we make sure it works for all the stakeholders. And of course, as an investor, like an owner and a founder, you're also a stakeholder. So you also have to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself, things also go sideways.
True.
But there must be a business model. So there must be a problem that you're solving, and you must have a very good solution. And that's also the most fun, of course, to develop with the right team.
And what's next for you? Well, what's next for your team? You're commercializing and you're trying to scale up the amount of pallets you can produce and get this ready for kind of some big growth?
Yeah, you start to build more factories. You start to develop different models together with customers in the industries that are more catered to their specific needs. For example, for fruits and vegetables, you need a different pallet than for electronics. And but yeah, it's a lot of listening to our customers. Like, okay, what works for you guys, and what have you tried before that didn't work? Like, so if somebody has really tried to solve something that didn't work, that's the best place you can be, because then they did an effort, they did an investment, and if they didn't find it yet, they're searching for something like a solution. And this is how we like to develop new things, and that's almost endless. But basically, I'm trying to make myself a bit obsolete, like that I'm not that needed anymore, especially for the continuation of the company, and that's very important.
I think that's a valuable approach, a valuable lesson for people, which is like so easy to take a technology that you've developed and go, oh, we could make this thing, and then build it and they will come mentality. But I think key learning is making sure that you're solving a big enough problem and not applying what you've just learned to something where there isn't really that big of a need. So that validation is critical. So I do agree that that's a smart learning.
Yeah, indeed, that's a smart thing to do. You can develop something that's brilliant and nobody wants it. Well, then it starts to become a bit stupid. So that's why you just have to go out and see. But that's not always like the case, I think when Apple came with the iPad, and they would tell people like 50 years ago, hey, you want an iPad? No, because you don't know what it is. And then they brought it to the market, and they became like first mover, and they had like the blue ocean in there. And they still sell a lot of these things. Yeah. So it's not always the case, but developing something in a market where you have a lot of competition and you don't really unique, you don't have to really like good USPs. That's not smart, because the chances to succeed are very slim.
Yeah,
and that's waste of resources.
Brilliant. Well, look, I've learned a few things through this, which is basically look for the big opportunity. Don't give up at any price. Be disciplined. That you got through your military background, and things will come basically, but make sure you're addressing a big enough opportunity. And I really think that the CocoPallet has a very strong opportunity to become an obvious choice for lots of your customers, because I don't know many corporates or bigger companies that aren't looking at ways to reduce their CO2. And of course, as a whole shipping infrastructure still runs on pretty nasty diesel and stuff, a good way to do that is to avoid having materials traveling halfway around the world just to be made into pallets and then have a one single use and then end up as charcoal or burnt or whatever. So I think Singapore's going to love your pallets, Michael, because we're only a small country and we need a bit more soil. So I think we could be importing all these goods and then just shredding it and turning it into a bit of biomass to grow our target of 30% of our food to come from Singapore by 2030.
But imagine if you make 20 million pallets times, let's say 15 kilos. That's a lot of biomass.
It is.
That can turn deserts into healthy soil, like gardens, and it totally makes sense. And of course, what you do has to make sense. But what we learned basically from this is you have to look at problems and when we are young, we learn to stay away from problems. But as an entrepreneur, you have to see you look at different eyes at problems. What's the opportunity in that problem? And can I solve this problem with another problem we have? So then we solve two problems at the same time. Well, that's basically what we do.
100%. I think that's the beauty of it. And as you brought up at the beginning, you're offering a product which is a lot cheaper or significantly cheaper, at least for providing the same quality of service. So I think a lot of people always think that impact is something that you're having to compromise on. This is a nice example of where you just have to, in some cases, understand some kind of adjacent problems and have the imagination and the will and determination to stay the course and produce something that can address it. And you absolutely deserve to have some success on the back of this. And I really look forward to being invited to a few of your factory visits or tours in the future in all the most beautiful tropical places in the world.
Do come, because I promise you one thing: the opening parties will always be on the beach.
That's
because
good.
That's where the factories are.
Because that's where you're getting the coconuts.
There's a lot of coconuts around there, so see, it has to be fun, because what we do is pretty hard. And if there's no fun in the game, it is unbearable. So you must have fun with the team and also celebrate your when things go well, because that's what you deserve.
Well, I really look forward to being there. I'm going to have a coconut caipirinha in my hand or something.
It will be probably a pina colada, but
that's true. Pina coladas.
I'll send you an invite when we get there. It's very close to Singapore, where we built the first factory.
So, guys, if you're interested in CocoPallet, then hit the link, connect to Michael on LinkedIn, check out the website, and if you know any big potential customers or value-aligned investors, then I'm sure he'd be grateful for the introduction. Michael, thank you so much for the chat and for your time today, and all the best with